Brian Beers, thank you for joining me today on Acquiring Minds.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Brian, you're the owner of dozens of Midas locations in Pennsylvania, around the Philly metro area. And you've recently been a leading voice, at least on my radar, of the benefits of franchises. So I wanted to have you on to delve more into that topic for this audience, the acquisition entrepreneur searcher audience, many of whom will have had contact with franchise businesses for sale, existing franchise locations for sale. But before we dive into that, let's get a little bit of background on you, elaborate on these dozens of Midas locations that you have, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm 35 years old. In Philadelphia. As of today, my brother and I operate 30 Midas franchises in Philly. And then we also, part of the expansion was into north central New Jersey and a suburb about an hour north of Philly. So that's kind of our radius. How we got into it was, it's a family business. My dad got in 1976 when he was 22 years old with his dad. So I'm like, I guess technically third generation. And he went through the process of opening new locations, acquiring existing locations. Him and my uncle, kind of at its peak had anywhere between like 6 to 8 locations all in Philly. After college, business wasn't doing too great, and I decided I'd join and give it a shot and see if I could, have a positive impact. And so that's what I did. I joined and started learning and, helped grow the sales. And in 2016, we decided, we want to make more money, and my dad owned the company. So the only way that was possible is if we had more locations that, my brother and I owned. So we went out and started buying additional locations. So we bought 2, and then another 1, another 2, another 3, 5, 7, just kind of, group by group started swooping them up, and, eventually bought my dad and uncle out, and here we are today.
Okay. And so you started that acquisition path in 2016. How many years had you been in the business under your dad at that point?
6
How well
years.
did you know? So you knew what, wow. Okay. So 6 years and you knew it really well.
I was, growing the business. I was pretty much running the company at that point. It's decided, it was the only way we could grow. And, we started then.
So you were running the company, but it was still your dad's.
Yep.
You and your brother started buying businesses. And at some point, not first, you didn't buy your dad out
Correct.
First. You kind of circled back around to buy him.
20. We had probably around 20 or so under our like separate entity that we own, and then we were able to, have enough money to put together a deal. So
Great. And so how many locations do you have now? Did you say?
Today we have 30.
30. Great. And give us a sense of scale by revenue if you can. And what does profitability look like for a Midas franchise?
Yeah. So we'll do about 36 millions, our like run rate on sales. And we have about 200 employees between the locations. And how much money you can make, it really depends. We're probably in the, 10%-ish kind of range. Mm-hmm. Our best locations though can make 20, like they crush it. Our worst locations can lose $100,000. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Brian, give people, as I said, you kind of become this voice out there for the benefits of franchising. Give people that pitch, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of benefits. A big part of it, I think, is the ability you have to scale very quickly. At least in it depends. It all depends on the brand and stuff. But if we're talking about guys who are interested in the acquisition side of it, there's tons of franchises out there. Tons of people that get into them and want out. They want to retire. And like if you're young and energetic and you're a good operator, like there's tons of opportunity. And so, if I was running Beers, Tire, and Auto or whatever it would be called as an independent business, I mean, it would be, I would be nowhere close to where I'm at today in terms of, the size of the company, the money we make, my lifestyle to be able to surround myself with, a really good leadership team who can handle a lot of the day-to-day that gives me freedom. I mean, all that comes, the sales and volume. And I think in a franchise system, the ability to grow relatively quickly is what I, is my big pitch and, why I talk about it.
And to be absolutely clear, you're talking about growing through acquisition.
Yeah, we opened 2 new locations, but not all of them besides that were through acquisitions.
Because if you are in a mature franchise system, which Midas is, decades old.
Yep.
Really, your only way to grow territories or locations is by acquiring, because there won't be much green space, if any, left.
Well, it depends. So in Midas's case, there's still a ton. Like, people don't drive more than the zip code they're in to get their cars fixed. Like 80% of our business comes from the zip code we're in, plus maybe one more. And so, like, I have locations that are 10 or 15 minutes apart that have zero competition from each other. So, I mean, I could probably fill in another 30 locations in our existing market. Like, at least in Midas's case, that's not really a problem. The issue more in our case is finding real estate is, in prime retail locations, that's 4,000 square foot, that's zoned for automotive, all that's very difficult. Mm-hmm. And so, especially as an independent, to try to compete with, like, what Midas is wanting, what Pep Boys and Mavis and Firestone and all the guys are competing pretty much for that same kind of prototype. So that's the issue. But in other businesses, especially ones that are territory based, where Midas isn't, it's because it's location based. Yeah, the mature ones, a lot of them are scooped up, or what's left is, like, maybe not desirable markets.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's steel man this argument. So there are many people in my audience, many searchers, many business people in general have, for lack of a better phrase, kind of an anti-franchise bias. They don't like them for a variety of reasons. Maybe they think that, the business in a box thing, while attractive, can also feel like, you can't bring your creativity to the table as much. Sure. You're not as much of your own man or woman as you want to be. That might all be kind of perceived, but then there's the very real fact of you are going into business with a franchisor, so that introduces kind of another party into the equation of your business, which there can be risk there. There can also, of course, be benefit. So address a few of those, please.
Yeah. So first of all, the box. So you're going to buy a business in a box. You get a proven business model, you get a marketing plan, you get a support system, you get training, you get all this stuff. That's the benefit. The bad side is you have to live in that box. Like, you only can provide products and services that the franchisor approves of and that fit within their business model. For example, at Midas, if I decided I wanted to start doing body work, or I want to market, like, we do car stereos and all this stuff, like, I mean, some of it I probably could do as one-offs. Like, they're not going to, kill me over it. But, if I want to go on the radio and start talking about it, like, that'd be a problem, because there's other franchisees, in that market that aren't going to do those things. And then that makes the brand, kind of degrades the value of the brand. And so, you have to play by the rules. Now, it really depends on, is that the type of person you want to be? So for me, like, not to say I'm not creative, I'm pretty creative, but, like, I don't need to go out there and, like, invent a new problem or solve something. I'm more on, like, execution and operation. So I think for people that are really good at, like, just here's the playbook, go and run it. Like, for those people, like, I think franchising is a great fit. But if you're one that, like, doesn't want to play by the rules and you want to always come up with a new problem and try to find these new challenges to solve, it's probably not the right fit. But if you like solving challenges, or, like, how do we serve more customers? How do I improve my profitability? How do we drive more sales? Like, problems that live within this box, then yeah, I mean, franchising can be great.
And in your own experience, have you ever, and if so, how many times, chafed against the franchisor?
Yeah, it happened last week. I wanted to try there's tons. So in real estate, right? There's tons and tons of these in the Northeast here in Philadelphia. There's tons of these small, like, 3-bay service stations, right? So it's a gas station, it'll have, like, a 3 bays, right? And there's tons of them. And so I kind of thought, hey, if we could, like, operate a Midas shop out of one of these 3-bay garages, overhead's very low, employee count would be low, everything would just be low, sales, lower too. But, if we could put up a bunch of these satellite stores, and then, not far from existing stores, I could funnel work too, whatever the overflow was. So that was my concept. And I've been thinking about this thing for years. And in previous leadership, they were open to this idea. In current leadership, they denied it and told me no, because they didn't like the idea of an active gas station and liability and stuff, even though we wouldn't be running the gas station. So anyhow, I guess I'm off that bucket and now off onto something else. But, and then there's, like, what's the future of the business side of it? Like, I don't know, there's this whole thing of, obviously EVs and all this stuff, which I don't really believe is going to be a problem in my lifetime, at least for a while. And so, but there is this question of what markets do we attack next, and I'm in favor of going after glass, right? Glass is like a huge market. There's tons of opportunity out there. But like that's the kind of thing that the franchisor, if we want to change the business model or / add a new service line, that's something the franchisor really has to get on board, and they have to lead it. But when we get into like creativity side, it's a partnership, like you said. And one of the big things I always recommend to people is, figuring out like to what degree does the franchisor take input from the franchisees. And so there's some franchise like Midas is actually very good in terms of wanting feedback from franchisees, wanting ideas like what are best practices, what is working. And then the best ideas get spread throughout the system. So I've had a number of things that we've kind of started here that, or we took an idea and perfected it or perfected the execution of the idea that Midas has then kind of taken a hold and other people are, doing it across the country. And so I think, your creativity is kind of within the reins of how do we execute the existing system better, and then does the franchisor take those ideas and work them into their new playbook. And so I think, the more kind of there's that two-way street feedback, the better it is for the franchise system and the franchisees to have access to kind of the best practices from around the country.
And if somebody is considering buying into a franchise system and they're talking to other franchisees, that's something that they should ask. How receptive is the franchisor
are they to new ideas? The other thing you can find out is if they have what's called a franchise advisory committee, or a FAC for short, which is basically kind of like, so I'm on the FAC for Midas, and it's kind of like, the top guys in the country, not, obviously usually the biggest franchisees are on it because they kind of have the most influence, but normally they like to have a mix of some of the biggest ones, some medium sized and some smaller one that kind of matches the, kind of the makeup of the franchisee base. And so, we meet quarterly or so and we have different committees, and like, it's really a good partnership to figure out, like I'm on the new store growth committee. So I'm working with franchise development and other franchisees and real estate to talk about how do we grow rooftop locations? How do we make Midas a more attractive place for franchisees to come? There's people who are on advertising. There's people who are on operations, profitability. And so, a newer franchise system may not have that just because, they're kind of small and they just, they got a lot to figure out. But most of your older established ones are most likely to have one. If they don't, like, I'd be a question of, well, why don't you have it? How do you get feedback from franchisees, et cetera?
Great. And just on this point about creativity, before we move on, so one of the kind of big areas of creativity within any business is the marketing. Like, how do you drive demand for your product or service? But I would imagine that that's one of the places where a franchisee is most hamstrung, because the franchisor is going to be ultra protective of the brand, because that's really part of the value of what you're buying with your franchise fees. And that's what all the other franchisees are going to care about, and that consistency and so on. So it would seem like the marketing, which traditionally is where there's a lot of creativity, would actually be there would be pretty tight guardrails. Respond to that. And as a follow-up, you said, you can have creativity in driving sales. So how does a franchisee drive sales if not with creative marketing?
Sure. Yeah. So the marketing side, like in our case, they work with a marketing agency. They have like pre-canned, things you can say. So you say, hey, I want to do direct mail and I want to drive tires. They say, great. Here are like 20 different options you have on what you can say or do, or brakes or air conditioning, or, in our case, I guess this leads back to how do we drive sales. We're really big into consumer financing. So we have a number of programs that allow people to get 6 to 12 months if they have good credit, and if they have bad credit, we have programs to help people that way too. And so, so I'm somewhat restricted on what we can do there based off of what they've approved. But even then, like I've said, hey, I want to do direct mail advertising promoting our no credit needed programs, right? And so you say, well, we don't have anything. I said, all right, well, can we get something approved? So then I worked with the marketing team through a number of months, who go back to Midas Legal and like eventually come back with like 3 options that legal is approved that we're allowed to say. So sometimes the creativity, like, out of the box, you may not be allowed to do it, but if they work with you on it, a lot of times you can get your message across as long as, everybody signs off on it. And so how do we drive sales? So that's a big one for us is that the other things we've tried, like we set up our own call center. in the Philippines that, all of our calls kind of got routed to that way. And then we're able to record them and, track our ability to set appointments. A lot of them have to do with kind of the internal process that we follow, whether it's, we go to sell, like the order that we go, the things that we talk about, like we've gone through different like Sandler sales training or Dale Carnegie, like trying to implement some of those practices, but using kind of the Midas way. The franchise is really, it's kind of the spectrum of how much they control you or want to control you. Some like Midas is kind of on the spectrum of I'm not gonna say zero control, but minimal control. Like each franchisee runs automotive shops and carries the Midas name, right? So they're like, everybody does it a little bit different. Even within my 30 stores, they're all gonna like check out cars a little bit differently, build estimates, present estimates, right? The look and the feel is going to vary widely based on them. Then on the total other end of the spectrum is like a Chick-fil-A, which is, kind of not really a franchise, but people get the point that that's like, they are going to have the owner operator there every day. And like everything is going to be to a T exactly the same. Right. And then there's lots of franchises that are in the middle. And so part of it depends on, getting into the franchise and really figuring out, is it kind of like you are going to follow the system, this is the only thing you're going to do? Or is it kind of like you're going to run your own business, you're going to share in these shared, brand and advertising and benefits, but you kind of have more flexibility too. So there's a spectrum here too.
Sure. And that's, again, something that when you're considering what franchise brand to become part of, that you need to be asking about, figuring that out. How restrictive is the franchisor? And is that something you ask, or is that something that just is like, it kind of emerges on its own?
It really depends. Like automotive is like, there's so many different cars. There's so many things that can go wrong with cars. Like there's so many, range of skill sets of technicians that they kind of have to have flexibility. Otherwise it'd be very difficult. But I mean, if you're like painting houses, like you're painting houses, right? Like it's not like it's going to be this huge like number of things that could come up. I guess there could be different surfaces, or like, do we do painting? Do we lime washing? Do we do insides, outsides? Like there could be some variability there, but it's not going to be the same as automotive.
And just to be absolutely clear with people, the ability to grow quickly through acquisition is because versus growing through acquisition by buying independent businesses is so frictionless in franchises because why? Paint a picture.
Yeah, so a couple of reasons. One is as an existing franchisee, there's minimal hoops you have to jump through. Right? Like if I want to buy another franchise, I'm already like approved as a franchisee. Corporate has to sign off on it, but in general, they're not going to hamper it as long as you're a good performing person. Versus like you want to sell to an outsider, you need to, like the franchisor has to approve them. They have to go to training. There's like, they're going to have to finance it. There's all these things that are going to happen that could fall through at the last moment. And the franchisor is generally going to have a lot more say in terms of, do they want this person in the system or not? And just because you found someone who's willing to pay your price doesn't mean that they're going to approve it. And so there's this kind of like guaranteed, buyer component. The other reason is like that, because of that, is like franchisees want to sell to other existing franchisees. And I know we're probably going to get into this a little bit, but like generally they're going to go to their neighbor first or somebody who they think would be a good buyer and they're going to go through all those options before they ever go out to the public. And because of that, like you kind of have all these off-market private like deals. I mean, most of the stores I've purchased have been, only one has been publicly advertised. All the other ones, literally, I was the only person talking to them. There was no like bidding competition. There was no, it was just me. And so think about that. You want to try and buy something, you're the only potential buyer, and it's your deal to mess up or deny it. And a lot of that is it happens over time, becoming known, liked, and trusted. Like the franchise is like a country club where eventually everybody kind of knows each other and they know who the good performers are, because a lot of times corporate shares rankings, so you can kind of see who's at the top of the list and who's at the bottom. And over time, it's who do you trust? And like if you're going to sell their business, most people like they care about their employees. They want to kind of hand over the business to somebody who's going to take care of their employees. If you have a track record of not only do you buy other people, you perform well, but generally like you have a good reputation within the brand and kind of, within the employees, that, all that just makes it, an easier transition.
And so that's kind of like your access to deals and the ability to buy quickly. But talk about integration, because that's a huge sticking point in all acquisition.
Yep.
But so much less so in franchises. Explain that.
Yeah. So in every franchise, I mean, it's almost plug and play. I mean, we've bought in locations and, literally the point of sale stays the same. The uniforms are still the same. The core processes are the same, right? Like it's still a Midas, right? So like we can literally switch like ownership. We buy it on a Monday. And the only thing that changes is on Thursday or Friday when they get paid, it's like coming out of a different bank account. And then over time, we have our ways of doing things, right? The sales process and the marketing and the whatever. But like, we don't have to start that day one, right? We start to trickle that in as we start to, over time. But, if I was buying an independent business, let alone 5 in a single day or 7 in a day or 20 in a day, think about you're going to have different point of sales. So you're going to have to change that. Like day one, you have to change it. So then you got to retrain all these people. And then you're going to have all these people grumpy because their system was so much better. And then you're going to tell them, well, we're not going to like do transmissions. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do this anymore. And then people are going to quit because people don't like change. And, they don't like, the guy who's the rebuilding transmission specialist or whatever, like isn't going to be out of a job. And so now you've got turnover of senior people, like you're not doing all these services that you used to do that customers might be coming in for. And you're going to be remodeling the place. You're going to be telling them like, you're going to follow this checklist now. And they never had that before. You're going to be open Saturdays and they weren't before. And so like people are they're going to quit and then you have to restaff the stores. And all that just leads to, most likely lower sales and just headaches that, slow down the process. But the franchise is kind of plug and play. Generally, it's pretty smooth. There's obviously hiccups, but that's why.
Well, for my guess, one of the big points of conversation is that day one speech. So the new owner comes in and there's kind of a speech between, and an official handoff, an introduction by the old owner to the new owner. And it's also it's always fraught with a lot of anxiety on both parties' part, the buyer, my guest, and all the employees. I suspect that like, maybe those day one speeches don't even happen in your case, or if they do, it's so smooth. It's like, because ultimately, like you said, I mean, not much is changing and they may see their employer as much as being Midas as the franchise operator or no. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So it varies. So like, so yes, I do that speech. I've done that speech, 20 times.
Okay.
Usually personally. But then, so, it's a handoff saying the old owner's normally saying, hey, guys, I'm retiring, meet Brian and Chris. Like, they're your new owners. They're going to take care of you. And then, we give a little background on our history. Hey, our family's been in the mice business for 45 years. We have X amount of locations. We usually tell them, listen, I know you're going to be scared of X, Y, and Z, but like, let us assure you, we've done this X amount of times. It's going to work out. Everybody's got a job. We always backdate tenure. So if they've been with that guy for 8 years or 4 years or 2 years or whatever, that's backdated with us. So like, for PTO and health insurance and all this stuff. And in a lot of cases, our benefits and pay plans are better than whatever the outgoing guy is. Like they might go up to 2 weeks and instantly, a guy might have 3 weeks vacation with us, or we have a 401k, or like in a lot of cases, we have a better health insurance plan. Or, our comp plans, guys are making a lot more money potentially if they can increase the performance. And so, a lot of times we'll speak a little to that. But honestly, most of the guys probably don't even hear it. And then, so we usually by day 2 and 3, like our district managers and COO and everybody are going around, sitting down with everybody one-on-one when they have more time, trying to get to know them. And we've never really had anybody, well, maybe one or two people quit kind of on day 1 or 2. But most of the time, people are willing to give us a shot. And, the good thing, once again, part of like that network is like a lot of people kind of know our names because we're pretty local. So like, especially some guys have traveled too. So like we've bought in stores, we've absorbed employees who worked for us like in the past. But they'll kind of like recognize the name or they'll know we've been around and, we have a good reputation. So that's helpful. And by the bigger locations, like we bought 7 stores, in a single shot. And we went over 2 days to visit everybody. But by by day 2, everybody had heard. So it wasn't like it was this big aha moment. There's just a matter of like, you guys know they're sold and here are your new owners. And so.
Brian, why A couple things when you described how you like approach an owner to sell, and in many cases, like they weren't talking to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
A few questions. First, I know that seller financing is a big part of your acquisition strategy, so please talk about that, because that doesn't, I mean, heavily seller finance deals as I understand it. But first that. Second, why, given how kind of fertile it seemed like this kind of the market was in Philly for a Midas roll-up, and that it was a mature franchise, so it's been around for decades, why hadn't somebody else done this last year or 20 years ago? So first on the seller financing, what do some of your acquisition deals look like?
Almost every deal we've done has either been we bought in cash if it's like a one-store deal for, under $200K, or we seller finance it, in which the seller will finance, 70%, 80%, 90%. My biggest deal was 97.5%. They seller financed. The last time I went to a bank for an acquisition loan was in 2016 for the first two, because I didn't know about seller financing back then. And so, kind of generally how I approach it, and I'll go how I approach it and then how it kind of works, is, we go to the seller and say, listen, like, this is how we bought, X amount of locations before. This is like the best deal for us, and it's the best deal for you. And so, like, you always premise it by like, hey, we're experienced, we've done this a lot, right? Is that for the seller, they get there's more flexibility in what the price is, because if there's no bank has to approve, there's like not this big underwriting thing. It's kind of like, we're willing to pay a premium if we feel that we're getting a good deal on the terms. And so the price has some flexibility. Second of all, they get cash flow. Like, as a business owner, you're used to X amount of $1,000 per month cash flow, right? Like, and so they get to kind of continue that. So in a lot of cases, I'm their retirement plan. Like, we're going to pay them $10,000 a month for the next 10 years or whatever it is. Like, I'm this kind of, I create this annuity that they get on a business that they understand, right? That they understand automotive, versus they take this chunk of money and they stick it into the stock market or with a broker or whoever, and they really don't understand like what's going to happen to it. And it's really unpredictable, versus mine is like pretty stable. They're going to get to defer their taxes. So instead of paying capital gains on this whole lump sum, which most of these guys, it's going to be almost the entire balance. Like, they're not going to have too much like basis points. But instead, when they sell it on seller finance, like, it's an installment loan, so they pay the same amount, just it's spread out over X amount of years. They're also going to earn interest from it. So rather than me paying a bank, they're gonna get the money. And finally, like, once back to that like track record, is like, we have a track record of doing this thing, and so they inherently trust me, and they, I'm like a pretty good bet. And so, hard for an outsider to do, but once you're in a system, it's a lot easier to build that reputation. And so that's kind of like why they would want to do it. Plus, it's just quick. It's easy. Like, they don't have to, like, I don't ask for tax returns. I ask for a P&L, like one P&L, and that's all I really need. And so it's just like, it's quick, it's easy, it's reliable, it's cash flow, there's tax benefits, right? All those reasons. And then, I'll when I talk to somebody, I just kind of lay out those things. And almost every single time, people are like, okay, yeah, it sounds good. Like, let's see what the numbers look like. And so...
why hasn't somebody else come along and done this before you?
There's other guys doing it throughout the country, like friends of mine. But like, automotive is pretty... it's a local business. Like, most owners like own stores relatively local to them. And so Philly, like, there's kind of this changing of the guard where it was, back then it was a lot of older owners. It was really fragmented ownership. Like, the biggest player, I think, was us, and we had 6 at the time. Like, and then there's another guy who's got about 17 or so in New Jersey and Philly, who's kind of like my competitor for buying these things. And he, at the time, he probably had 6 or 7. He had probably about the same. And he's been on the same path as me. He's been buying up locations as well. And so a lot of it's just, it's kind of the timing of it, to be honest. And same for my buddies. And I got guys in Columbia and South Carolina. I've got guys in Tennessee. I've got buddies in Texas, like California, all running a similar playbook, where they're younger and they're buying out the guys that want to retire, and they're good operators. And that's a big part of it too, which we can touch on a little bit later. But like, a lot of times these locations I'm buying, many of them are losing money. Like, they're not doing well. And so, like, a lot of it is, it would be hard to get financing on some of these deals. It would be impossible to get financing on some of these deals because of the lack of profitability. And so like part of the benefit is as you get bigger, like we have the ability to kind of take over a location that's losing 10 grand a month or whatever it is and like invest the money and then sustain the losses for X number of months till we get this thing up and going. And then, then it starts cash flowing. Like we can talk about it a little bit later because I don't want to get too off the seller financing, but in a lot of cases, that's like a very real thing. And so that could be why other people haven't done it because they haven't trusted themselves as an operator to turn it around.
Yeah. And are some of these owners who just have one or a small amount of locations, are they owner operators? Are they people who have W-2s and this was like a side thing for them?
Most of them are, I had one, the one that like was losing the most amount of money. We're still struggling a little bit. He had another job. That was his primary source of income, I believe. And like he had 3 stores and, cumulatively they might've been making like 80 grand a year, but like, that number is up and down. And then you have like, a couple pieces of equipment you got to buy or whatever it is. And that cash flow can quickly go to zero between three locations. And so he was selling cause he had another job opportunity, quote unquote, and wanted this off his plate. But besides that, no, every other one they had been, we say owner operators, but it was like they had no other job. They were primarily, they weren't like, well, some of the guys were like in the stores every day, but other ones were, had general managers in place.
And for a location that's not losing money, that's actually a healthy Midas location, what do the terms look like? Or the multiple roughly? Is it typical 3-ish?
Yeah, 3-ish. I think we've paid 3.5. Like, you buy more, you're going to pay more in the location wise. Like, we did a deal where it was 5 stores. They were probably making $600K. Let me just do some rough math here. And we paid all in about $2 million. We're paying for that one. But we paid, so that was the price. So we got one of these deals, 5 stores making $600K. $2 million was like the purchase price. We put $50,000 down so that's the 2.5% deal. And we're paying that guy, I want to say it's like, like 10 to 12K a month for the next, 13 years.
Wow.
And that's and the $2 million price was like inclusive of interest, of principal and interest. So in total, we're going to pay this guy $2 million over the course of whatever it was, 13 years.
Yeah. Well, I heard your points there, Brian, and that there was a pretty compelling pitch for seller financing. But still, if I'm that guy with a business doing $600,000, I'm going to shop that around a little bit. And yes, I might be used to getting, monthly income. And so maybe I'm kind of married to that format for how I see my money come in. But like, most people just want the lump sum. Talk to other business owners in non-franchise land or the one Brian Beers aren't buying out. And they're like, yeah, no, you have to push them for even 10 or 15% seller financing, let alone 70% financing for over 13 years. So I just want to push back on that a little bit. I think most people want the lump sum and not to have to think about it anymore. And then they'll give that lump sum to their financial advisor if they really want some sort of annuity.
Yeah, that's why franchising is better. I don't know what to tell you. I'm talking to a guy now in another group of stores. It's like 5 locations. There's real estate involved. He only has he has 1 mortgage. He's doing very well, better than my store, like on a per average basis. And I pitched him on a seller finance deal that it would be, this could be like a $7 million thing. I pitched him on a deal of giving him like, I don't know, 200K down and 300K a year, whatever. It was like 500 all in, including the real estate and stuff. And he was open to it. Like, so like, there's something about it. I don't know that the guys, and part of it is like, they trust me. They like me, right? Like once you're an established person, like, I'm more reliable than the stock market in a lot of cases. Like I think it is, but for an outsider, like if I was selling my business to an outsider, like I have no idea how they're going to perform. Right. Like I want my money, but like when you're in the system and they're, these are like friends of mine too. Like these aren't some random people. Like, I've known both these guys all these guys. There are 2 biggest stores with like 5 stores and 7 stores, but we've done 3s and 2s and 1s along the way. And like every single one of them they've seen me for years at these local meetings. Like some of our stores share like geographical regions. So like our employees would sometimes go between them. We'd help each other on, marketing, or help each other on operational issues or different questions. Like, that's like, there's this whole community aspect that when you join a franchise, you become part of this community, and that like generally like they become friends of yours. I mean, I some of my like best friends are more like, closer to my age, obviously, and not retired, but like, that there's this whole aspect so that you're kind of like selling it to your friend in a lot of cases, or someone you really trust, versus an outsider, some totally random person. Like, I don't know you. Like, I want my money.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And like, and in the independent business world, like every single person is an outsider, every single business. There's no sense of community. There's no built-in trust. And so I think that's why this is like totally mind boggling to people outside of it. Cause like, it's this whole aspect that just doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. It is really different and appealing the more I learn about it, I have to say. Okay, well, you talked about, in answer to my question, like, why hasn't somebody done this before? And it sounds like whatever, timing. And now there's this changing of the guard in your market and in other markets you named around the country where that other of your colleagues and friends are active. So let's talk more abstractly, not just about Midas, but in our pre-call, you and I had talked about like, just kind of any maybe fragmented franchise in your local market. Say I'm in Dallas or I'm in Arlington, Virginia, the DC area. Like, how could I apply, Brian Beer's thinking to the opportunities here if I'm starting from scratch? I'm not looking at Midas necessarily.
Yeah. So I guess it all depends on what your goal is. If your goal, like there's two ways, right? The first way is like, I'm going to go after the legacy brand that has, do this roll up where you're buying existing locations as the primary source. There's this other avenue of growth, which is through like the development arm, which is you're going to develop new locations. And I can kind of speak to kind of both. But if you're going after this, the roll up strategy, generally, yes, it's going to be a legacy brand, something that has been around for at least 20 years, something that has a lot of units, right, is a big part of it. So Midas is 1,000 units or whatever. Subway, there's like, 45,000 or whatever it is. There's a ton of them. And then B, it's got to have fragmented ownership. So it's got to be different owners. If there's 20 locations in DC, like I would hope to see 15 different owners, right? If one guy owned all 20, like if I owned all 20 of them, the likelihood of anybody else coming in and buying one or two from me, like I'm not going to sell one or two. Like, why would I do that, right?
Yeah.
They can have them all or they can have none, right? And so those are kind of like two of the big ones I would look for. A lot of units. So for example, Midas in Philadelphia, greater Philadelphia region, there's like 60 locations, right? So check that box. And in 2016, there was highly fragmented ownership. There was probably, 30 different owners, right? And then now, if anybody looked at it, like there's only probably 6 of us that own almost 60 of them. You know what I mean? Over the years, it has consolidated. So what worked in Philadelphia years ago is now not really a good strategy for Midas because of us. So those would be kind of my two factors. And like I said, I know other people, like I have some guys in Subway that I know who, a lot of people think Subway's like this dying brand, which they are losing locations. But the guys I talk to, I think it's actually a good thing because it's like pruning the bush where they're getting kind of rid of these, they were oversaturated in a lot of spots. So now that kind of helps make the existing source more profitable. And they're doing the same thing I'm doing. They're buying out these guys that want to retire or just like they're not good operators. They're getting them for pennies on the dollar, or they're getting them seller financed, and they put in they put their thing in together and they're turning around and cash flowing. And so, I've talked to 2 different guys that do this in Subway, and it's a very similar playbook that I'm running.
Brian, do you think this is? I mean, I think this is happening now for the same reason that people are interested in acquisition entrepreneurship generally. One of the big reasons, which is silver tsunami. So there's just the boomers are retiring. And so, or changing of the guard. I like how you put that. Okay, so that's happening not just in Midas, but across a lot of franchises, and that's probably the reason for all this churn and activity. And there's a window of opportunity here.
Yep.
So, let's really systematize this thinking. Okay, another thing that we all know is that there's just thousands of franchise opportunities out there. Many of them very long tail, low quality. You're probably not going to waste your time on them. So there's probably 100, 200, 300 established franchise brands. Like if I want to go out and systematically apply the Brian Beers, like what you're advocating, maybe look at 100 or 200 different brands in the DC area, and then kind of like build out a database of which ones seem the most fragmented in my local market, something like that?
Something like that. Yeah, I think there's about, so I went through one time, like they put together these different lists, like franchise 400 or franchise 500 or whatever. And I think I put together, it was Franchise Times at a 400, their top 400 by revenue. I think it was by franchise revenue. And of those 400, like I think 395 of them were over 25 years old. So like almost all of them were like relatively established brands that had a good amount of revenue and a good amount of locations. And so, yeah, I would say somewhere in that top 400 to 500 potential options, at least when we will look at kind of the roll-up strategy. And then, yeah, it's what's, then you start doing some research. Like you're looking at hair salons, or like you can look at, there's Great Clips, there's Sports Clips, right? There's like, I don't know, I forget the others, but there's like a couple of those, right? So then you can kind of look by your market to say how many locations of each, and there could be 5 of one and 20 of another, et cetera. And then you can start to get an idea from there.
And who do I reach out to? Do I just reach out to the franchisor and say, hey, I want into your network? Or do I approach an individual franchisee? Where do I start my research?
Well, it's a great question. There's lots of different ways you can go. I think if there's a specific it really depends on what phase you're in. Like if you're totally new, like you have no idea what you're looking at.
Yeah. Let's pretend you have no idea. Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple. Yeah. You could read the FDD, right? You could find a way to download the FDD if you want to go that route and just start to do some own independent research to see like, do I like this? But you also kind of have to know how to read an FDD to kind of get any value out of it. Honestly, the best thing, or like what I would do, is I would go to Biz Buy Sell, and you can search for existing businesses that are for sale. And in the thing, you can put keyword, and you can put franchise as the keyword. And so then it'll only show you franchise. Now, a lot of them will be blind, like they won't tell you what brand it is, so you have to sign the NDA and stuff. But I think that is probably one of the better ways to at least start to spark ideas to see like, because there's so much out there, and you don't know what you don't know until you start kind of looking through the financials. You start learning about these different franchises to get an idea. So I would do that, right? So it's Biz Buy Sell, and you can see what's for sale. There's the old just drive by, right? You just know it's a Jersey Mike's and it's a franchise, and you go in, like you said, and try and talk to the owner. I've done that before with other brands that we were considering, and the guy told me it was a terrible business and he was trying to sell it, and all these reasons. It was actually pretty funny. There's that. There is, working with a franchise broker or consultant of somebody who is, does this kind of for a living, and they help kind of play matchmaker. A lot of times, they're going to be more on the newer brand side, like the emerging brands, which I think we'll probably touch on, but they'll be able to help in terms of, maybe finding some resales that aren't necessarily listed on Biz Buy Sell, that are kind of kept more private. And yeah, I think generally, if you find something you like, then you can go to the franchisor directly as well.
Okay. Great. And one of the things that I've heard some of my guests say is like when they started looking for a business, they didn't want to do a franchise. They encountered how difficult it was to find any business to buy. So then they opened their minds to buying a franchise. And then when they actually looked around at some of the franchise resales that were on Biz Buy Sell, or maybe that a broker bought them, it was often like a location doing, 100 or 200,000 SDE. And in our world of search, like that's too small. The conventional wisdom is that bigger is better, and the sweet spot being maybe, $700 to $1 million in SDE. So these established franchise businesses, individual units, 100 to 200 SDE, way, way, way too small. However, now that I'm kind of hearing, your playbook and kind of getting into the network with a roll-up strategy, it could be, there's the vision there to grow your SDE rapidly. This might be a way in. Am I right about that? Should searchers open their minds to buying a single location, doing a paltry $100,000 in SDE?
Yes, as a beginning point. And so here's kind of at least how I'd approach that. It is nearly impossible to buy an existing multi-unit group of franchises doing $700 million or whatever that number is you said. Yeah. Because like if they're already doing that, they're going to want to sell to another franchisee like me. And if it's a good business, like another franchisee's going to buy it. Like why would they pass it up? And so, the only reasons they would is if, like, let's say it was in, I don't know, Louisiana or some kind of remote market that's small. There's maybe they're all 5 Midas shops or whatever it is. There's no other franchisees in the market, and the big guys who do fly across the country for whatever reason don't want to go to Louisiana. Maybe there's nothing bad against those stores. They're just saying, hey, we don't want to be in the South. We don't want this. We don't want that. So that would be kind of the only way you could find something, was to be a group of stores that had no surrounding franchisees that wanted it, and B, it was in a location that the national players don't want it. But in a lot of cases, the national players, if they're already going on an airplane, if the thing can make money and they can get it at a decent price, aren't going to pass it up. And so it's just going to be really hard to find that, almost impossible. Or it's like way overpriced, right? That maybe it's worth $3 million or whatever, and they want $6 million for it.
Yeah.
And the multi guys want it, but like they're saying, listen, like it's just not worth it. And so they may say, well, let me shop around, let me see if I can get a deal. And then, because the bigger the numbers, obviously the bigger that multiple variance becomes. So yeah, so it'd be hard to find. So then your playbook is, all right, if I can get in this thing they're making 100 to 200K, what do I do next? That's what like would spark the idea to say, hey, I can buy one, it's making 100. How many other locations are there? There's a fragmented ownership, blah, blah, blah. Like we go down that path. Because to be honest, a lot of cases in mine, like my stores make about 100, maybe a little bit more right now. Like, and so it's like, that's not like an unusual number on a per unit basis. It's just a matter of you need a bunch of them to start to make the money that, gets really exciting. And so, yeah, I would think you use that as a starting point to say, can we grow it from here? And if you feel that, maybe if it's a territory based thing and it's like, you are landlocked, all the other surrounding guys like have no interest in selling. They appear to be really good performers. You kind of have this market that the other surrounding guys don't really want, maybe not the best opportunity if you really want to grow it. On the other hand, you might find out, hey, that's a beginning location. Through talking to the franchisor and maybe the other franchisees, you find out, well, a couple of these surrounding guys, maybe only have a couple years left. They have no kids in the business. They're potentially open to selling down the road. Like that would then start to be interesting to me. So that's how I'd approach
So
that.
if I consider that $100,000, $150,000 SDE in single unit location, single unit franchise, existing franchise business, I better be darn sure that I have done my research about other acquisition opportunities in the neighboring area. Like I am as much analyzing and assessing the larger market as I am that lone location.
Yeah, the lone location itself, to be honest, I mean, you're looking at it, but like to understand the franchise model, to say, hey, how well are these guys executing the model? Like, it's also possible that like that location should be making 300K and these guys are just really bad executors. So like that would lead, you can grow this thing pretty significantly. And then if you can get them to 300K each, you only need a couple more. Then it's not like you need 30 of them to make some money. Or you might find out, hey, they're a really good operator, right? And the thing should be making 50. And then it's like, are you going to be able to sustain that? And so those are the couple factors. Then like the other part of this is development or kind of new greenfield territory, whatever you want to call it. That the downside of legacy brands and these roll-ups is a lot of times they're also located in legacy locations in older neighborhoods that have been kind of potentially, at least in Midas's case, they were great in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, but now they're kind of like these rougher areas, or there's no new development, there's no new money. And then all the new places that all the housing developments are, and they're building up these town centers, there's no Midas shops, and there's no automotive potential either. And so, a lot of times to get into these new hot markets or these places you really want to be, you got to kind of have to build them up either way. Or territory-based business, same thing. They're going to be like, the new place, like, in Florida, it's like Ocala is like really big and growing, right? Or the Villages are really big with all the retirement communities, which like there's no Midas shops down there. And anyway, so that is like the problem when you're looking at this roll-up is you're generally going to be in these older areas and that you're going to have to look at potentially new either way.
Yeah. Well, we're going to spend a minute on looking at new franchises and just doing a traditional kind of build a location and then build out multiple locations and explore that as an alternative. But a couple things, you keep talking about being a good operator versus a not so good operator. Any quick bullet points on like what makes a good operator? I mean, is it hard to be a good operator, or is being a good operator just like doing the work? Is there more to it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, at that point, it's running any business, like whether it's a franchise or running, your own independent business.
Yep.
Being a good operator, the principles are really the same, which is like,
Yep.
Focus on execution, like following the same process every day on every vehicle or every time that phone rings or whatever it is. Like it's consistency of execution is what leads to being, quote, a good operator. And I think, the franchise you have kind of like, what does that consistency look like? What does that playbook look like? Obviously they give it to you. If you have your own business, though, it's like, it's the same principles, which is like, you're nice on the phone. You say yes. Like you want people who want the business. So you're not like making them monkeys, like read a script. It's actually like, they shouldn't have to really read the script because you want them to like want the business and have the energy to like get them in the door, not just say the words. And so I think that's a lot of it. And then just, hiring great people, training them, having compensation plans that are rewarding for performance, encouraging tenure through, good benefits, all those things.
Yeah.
Okay. There's nothing special there, to be honest with you.
Okay. And then we've been talking about consumer franchises primarily, and brands, which kind of brick and mortar locations. What are your thoughts about service franchises?
Yeah, so tons of great options out there. I mean, we had operated one for a couple of years that was a mobile truck wash. So it was B2B, and we got contracts with companies that owned large fleets of vehicles, and someone had to kind of come on site and wash their tractor trailers, garbage trucks, delivery vans, that kind of thing. And so, I think there's tons of great options out there. I think, there's there's pros and cons, right? The pros are generally your overhead's lower, right? Because you're operating out of some like flex warehouse space or potentially even your home. You can, as you grow, potentially you can buy more territory and still operate out of that single location. You're just like increasing your drive time. And so all that kind of helps on that side. Generally they're going to be more labor based instead of like, you're not selling products, right? Like you're going to be selling labor. And so, you grow by, having more people on your payroll and like this bigger company to manage, which there's pros and cons. I think some of the challenges are, I think service businesses are a little harder to scale. I think you can make a lot of money. You could probably make your $1 million, but like I don't think there's not that many success stories of guys doing, 30 million, 50 million, 100 million, like there are in some more like the retail based franchises, in part because it's so dependent on people. So I think you can build
why is a Midas location any less based on people, since it's all people doing the work?
Well, so half our business is like of our mix, half is parts, half is service. So obviously we can't sell parts without the service side of it, without the labor side of it. But like when we look at our like P&Ls, it's roughly 50-50 parts and service. And so we have margin on that and we have margin on labor.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't realize that parts was such a significant part of the business. Let's consider new franchise opportunities. So we've been spending our time talking about roll-ups, talking about mature franchise brands. How do I consider that opportunity versus, helping to build out new locations of a brand new franchise?
I guess it's all about, is there a secret sauce? Like, is there something that these guys are doing that they have solved a new problem, they have a new product, they have a new service that is going to kind of open up a new market? Like, I think those are some of the big reasons, at least why I would look at like potentially a new one. I mean, for example, I'm personally looking at a fitness concept. We're partnering with some guys and opening up this fitness concept that uses EMS, so electronic muscle stimulation. So you wear these body suits basically, and you do a one-on-one workout. You can burn 700 calories in a 20-minute workout is the pitch. And so for people who are, they don't want to go to the gym, they might have a prior injury, they can't lift weights, they just like don't want to like spend an hour in the gym, but they want to, they like 20 minutes and they like burning calories. Right. So obviously it targets kind of upper, middle to upper income and people who play country club sports and et cetera. But it's like totally brand new. It's potentially like, the Orange Theory of whatever personal training you could say. And Orange Theory is like this wildly successful brand. And so these guys kind of have this new like business model that no one is doing. They're going to be the first ones in the country really to pioneer this thing. And so, so that's something like I'm excited about, and potentially, like I said, we're like looking pretty seriously into this thing, and kind of for all those reasons, right? It's a new concept. but that solves a new problem, and it provides a huge benefit to people that I think would do really well. So those are it.
Okay. And what about one that's maybe that's like kind of you're really taking a new concept to market and helping with the franchise do that.
Yep.
What about one that's maybe 10 years old? So a younger franchise where they're still greenfield, but it has product market fit, pretty demonstrable product market fit. Is there, because yours, obviously, I'm hearing a lot of risk in yours. This is a new concept. The market may or may not respond to it.
There's some risk.
Yeah. So maybe what about kind of the middle of the road there, a 10-year-old franchise?
They have a problem they solve. Like there's a company called Zoom Drain that I like. They do drain cleaning, inspections, repairs, and they're in like 50 cities or something, maybe a little bit more. So like they're not small, but they're not across the country yet. And there's a lot of things that I liked about I like about them. I'm like a customer of theirs, and they do a really good job. That's part of it. B is like it's one of these lower kind of costs, relatively lower cost. I mean, $250,000 or so to kind of get into it. It's kind of this niche service that's like relatively simple. Like you're inspecting and cleaning drains. It's like the primary source. In many states, you don't need to be a licensed plumber. So like it's not like you need this huge licensing thing. You need somebody who's like knows how to clean drains, but not this licensing requirement. The overhead's generally low, and like it's a totally recession-proof business, right? Like the drain gets clogged, it doesn't matter. Like it is getting unclogged one way or another. And then you got Roto-Rooter, you got some competitors, right? But like a lot of those guys are more now shifting focus to full service plumbing and some other projects where these guys are really down and in focused on like the specific thing. And so there's another one I like that I think is relatively new, and it has some of the qualities I think people like.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. A couple more questions for you, Brian, before we close it out. So circling back now to just the roll up of a legacy franchise brand. Yep. So what does it look? Oh, that's like in your case, or somebody who's successfully rolled up some locations. What does the exit look like? So like you've got so many locations. You're probably one of the biggest franchisees now in the country for Midas, I'm guessing. Yeah, there aren't that many people with number 4. There are not that many people within the the Midas franchise family who could buy you. I mean, maybe one of the top 3 or somebody in the top 10 could buy you out, but that's a small handful of people. Like that's a lot of risk there, and they're scattered all over the country. Who knows if they want to buy into Philly? So, and then you always hear about private equity being big buyers of franchise, as with everything, but of like multiple bundles of franchise locations. Should somebody pursue the strategy who's looking to sell in 7 to 10 years, or is the real play here to hold on to it for a long time?
Yeah, it really depends on you got to start with that end in mind, right? I think if someone wants to get in and get out in 7 years, they're probably going to be selling to another existing franchisee. Like, I don't know. I think that timeline is probably relatively short to get it to a number that would attract private equity. From my understanding, you need at least 5 million, right, in EBITDA to be attractive. Yeah. And then at that point, like, obviously if you can get to 10, you got a lot of guys interested. And so, it really kind of depends on how big do you want to get it, and then how quickly do you think you can get it there. But yeah, so if you're going to stay relatively small, and by small I mean under private equity basis, you're going to sell to another existing franchisee, either somebody kind of right below you or right above you in the rankings. Yeah. So for me, there's another group that has 100 or so locations, and they do have some locations in Philadelphia and the Northeast. And like, if I wanted to sell at like 4 or whatever, 4.5, like I'm not going to get a huge number from them, and I know that. Like they would be the easiest, quickest way, right? And they are like kind of private equity backed and a family office backed. But like, the best exit for me potentially would be, private equity, but we're kind of in this no man's land. We're not really big enough. We don't have enough income to kind of like get a bunch of them attractive, right? Because we're under 5. And so then, our path now is like, let's get this thing so it's making at least 5. And then, there are a number that would be interested. I've spoken to a few of them just to kind of start to understand, the kind of built to sell mentality of what does our business need to look like in X amount of years to make sense. And so like, that's how we're approaching it. How how long until I sell? I mean, it could be 10 years. I don't really know, but like part of the whole thing is I don't know. I like to build to sell. What's the end in mind? Like like how can I make this business as attractive as I can on the day that we're ready, that we're good to go? And so for us, I believe that will be the exit. I mean, the guys I talk to, there's a number of private equity companies that are, I mean, for me personally, in automotive, like they've done other automotive deals and franchises. They've done other franchise deals, not Midas specifically, maybe not service, but they've done both automotive and they've done both franchising. So they get the concept. I think that's key, is finding guys who've done it before and they really understand it. Not like it's their first franchise deal. I think that would be, I don't think you'd get the value that you would out of the guy who's, knows what he's looking at.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it does sound like you expect to exit, not at the end of your career, but probably sometime.
Yeah, one day prior.
Sooner than that.
I mean, you never know. The other option is like you get it so that the business, like you have a great team in place and you're able to make, enough money that you can live the life you want to live, and like, you really then have no reason to sell it. Because then you sell it, it's like, well, what else would I do? Like, you still need income coming in, right? So then you got to go and like start something from the ground up all over again. But on the other hand, if I build enough people around me and have a really good team, like I could go off and build the fitness concept to do whatever I wanted either way, right? So like you'd only really want to sell if you get to the point that I think it's weighing on your time or your energy, or you believe that it's going to go down, or like there's some sort of negative reason. Otherwise, if you can continue to build it, like it can support your life to do whatever you want at whatever size, and just really depends on what that looks like for the individual.
And how many hours a week are you putting into the business, and your brother Chris as well?
I don't know. I don't count them, but I spend, I don't know, probably 30 hours a week.
Full time? So almost full time still.
It's hard. I mean, I don't count them. And like, when you own the business, you're always thinking about it, right? I'm always coming up. Like, and I'm like the visionary too. So like, I'm the one coming up with the ideas of, oh, we should do this, we should do that. Like, I never really stop. And obviously I spend time on Twitter and, obviously promoting my, this franchise side and the franchise education, which, I'm working on a whole thing around that. But even even the things I talk about there are lessons I learned in running the business. And then I get ideas from there that go in the business. So it's hard to say. I mean, it's been integrated in my life for so long that I don't really know.
Okay. But, you could hire an operator or an executive to take over your 30 hours a week and more.
I mean, we have a COO.
You just choose not to. You're just because you just continue to enjoy being in the business. Yeah,
we hired a COO back in August who's taken over a ton off my plate, managing our district managers, and he's amazing. And so that's been a huge benefit. So a lot of my time is more, obviously working with him to kind of train him to kind of fill much of my shoes as possible. And then it's the growth, it's the expansion. It's, do we go into new markets? I mean, I'm looking at new locations. Working the relationships with franchisees, we want to buy. It's sometimes it's not necessarily like you're just going in the office and doing the work. It's more the kind of the surrounding aspects of it.
Sure. On the business versus in the business. Yep. Sounds like a good build to sell approach. So you touched on this new project of yours, kind of franchise education. It's, I assume, why I started to see you all over the place about 6 months ago or so. One of the things we talked about on our pre-call is franchise consultants in this world of, what they are and that they don't have the best reputation, and you fully recognize that and thought you could bring something else precisely because franchise consultants kind of suffer from tainted reputation. I'm not saying you're going to be a franchise consultant, but you are going to, sounds like, help people find that good franchise for them, that good franchise opportunity for them. I'm putting words in your mouth. So tell us what you're doing and why, and what problem you're solving that existing franchise consultants aren't already.
Yeah, so I am working just to help educate people on everything we talked about today, which is that franchising has provided a great life for my family since 1976. Right, it will continue to provide a great life for our family, for decades to come as I teach, my daughters, about business and growth. And so I think it's a really good opportunity. I think a lot of people have these preconceived notions for whatever reason about the negativity. And I think, like I said, it's provided a great life for me. And obviously you have 200 plus employees. Like, I'm able to provide a great life for our team. And I think there's some really good benefits. And so I think there's not enough people talking about it on Twitter and on podcasts and stuff. And, like you said, the silver tsunami's coming. There's $7 trillion of business changing hands. 10% of those are going to be franchises. So whatever, $700 billion worth of franchises will be changing hands over the next couple of years. And like, I think it's the best possible opportunity to get into one, whether that's a legacy roll up or whether it's you're doing a legacy brand and then you're doing new locations or whatever it is, right? Tons of opportunity out there in the world. And so yeah, I've been on Twitter. I talk about it a lot. I had a lot of people coming to me, kind of with questions on kind of all this stuff. So a couple things. I'm putting together, the course, to teach people, as much as information I can pack into there, kind of this intro to franchising about what it is, all the different fees, kind of like a realm of like, here's like what the world looks like. Cause there's no like perfect franchise, right? There's no franchise I could tell you and say, hey, go buy this, you're going to make money. Cause the perfect franchise is one that matches the person to their skill sets, like the things that I'm good at in my market, like in Philadelphia, cause you got to be local. And that has problems that you enjoy solving. Cause like every business has problems. It's, do you want to like deal with those types of problems? And I think if you can find those three things that like you can make, people are making money in every franchise. Like there's obviously some ones that probably are just people are set up to fail or I don't believe in the business models. But for the most part, when you read through these FDDs, there's people in every single line of business who are doing really well. And so it's just a matter of finding something that matches that. So my goal is to help people, discover what they want, what they don't want, and go from there. And so in terms of the franchise consultancy, I had a lot of people coming to me. What are the different ways? One of them is you find a franchise consultant who is somebody who, is part of this, like an affiliate network. They have all these different brands that are kind of in their portfolio. They can kind of take the things that you're looking for, income goals, financial goals, different industries, et cetera, locations. And they come to you and they present, a couple different options to say, hey, here are 4 or 5 different franchises that potentially meet what you're looking for. And then they kind of, help someone guide them through the process of becoming a franchisee, which includes 7 different calls and the FDD and franchise validation and like discovery day. And there's all these, it's the same process pretty much for every franchise, but different steps. And so, the problem or the reputation side of it is there's people out there who just don't have, like they were some corporate employee or they were like doing something and then now they're a franchise consultant, right? Like they don't necessarily have the experience to really know, what are the good things, what are the bad things. Like there's a lot of guys out there actually who I know who are, after I said some of this stuff, who I've since talked to who are really good. And they've been in the business for years. They know a ton of stuff. That there's others that I think just, it's kind of a job and they're trying it out. And like, for the franchisee, like signing that franchise agreement's a big deal. Like it's 10 to 20 years potentially kind of locked into this thing. And so like, it's a really big deal. And so you really want to make sure that, you find one that's really good. And obviously like the better you have, the better quality people that you have on the team, the more likelihood you're going to, make that move. And so, so anyway, I had all these people coming to me then, wanting recommendations of who I should talk to. And I figured, I'd become a franchise consultant. So I am now, I've been in it since October or so. I joined one of these networks that I thought was the best one. And, so now, yeah, I'm helping, I help a handful of people a month. I don't have like, all the time in the world, but the people I have helped, I mean, I think I've done a really good job. And it's been fun. So.
Well, the question I got to ask, Brian, is the one that, people who sell education online for a living always get, which is, you have disposable income, quite a bit of disposable income, all this experience. Why not roll all that income and experience into doing another franchise yourself rather than helping students?
Like to operate another franchise?
Yeah. Like get into like if I come to you and I say, Brian, what, help me figure out what franchise to do. And you can do the same analysis for yourself, and then go out and, do another 20 locations of some other franchise while you continue to have your Midas stuff.
I don't know. Part of me, so we've tried 2 other franchises as a franchisee, and like and in both of them, I was kind of like the lead person on them, you could say. Like we had people running the day to day, but like kind of employees, and I was kind of the lead person. And to be honest, both those failed, and like I think a lot of it is because like I don't know. you start something up, but then you think it's going to be this big diversified thing, like the Warren Buffett, I'm going to have this like a million different companies into this like portfolio. But like, unless you have really key people in place who I think can run the ball without you, like it comes down to you, right? So then I found my time was like really diversified and diluted between Midas and between these other things. And kind of the new one, the honeymoon phase, I would start it, I'd be all into it. And then I kind of like, I'd lose some steam over it, and then it wouldn't do as well. And then like something would happen at Midas, and I'd like all my attention would go, like we'd get a new acquisition, or we'd do some like usually good things would happen, and then like totally ignore the other business. And at the end of the day, both those businesses ended up losing money, significant amount of money, and just put more stress like on me. And so then, kind of going forward, we decided the only way we'd get into another business like that we had to operate was if someone else like was the franchisee, and we're just kind of, maybe we're partners in it, like the fitness thing. Like we're going to be there kind of financially to invest, to provide our, decades of knowledge, but we're going to have someone else who's got skin in the game, who really owns it. And we're there to help like add fuel to the fire, not to be the key person. And then the education side, I think it's fun, you have no cost to it. Right. Like, and so I can kind of turn it on, turn it off as much as I want. But it's not like it's this thing where, you've got all these expenses and this overhead. And, plus like I've made a lot of new friends. I've had people want to partner with me through that. Like I've a couple guys we're talking to who want to be that franchisee and want us on their team. So potentially getting equity in the business to kind of help them accelerate. So I think for me specifically, there's, it's not just about selling a course or making money there. It's really about, can I find guys who could be potential partners for us, who we could, back, with some money, but like, honestly, it's less about the money and more about, the knowledge, which is, I think, where we can add a ton of experience, and like I said, put fuel on that fire. So there's a couple different avenues for us, but that's a big part of it for me is these potential partnerships.
That's great, Brian. Well, tell people how they can find you online, please.
So Twitter, I'm the most active. It's at Brian Beers with an I. And I have a podcast as well, Business with Beers, where I have 2 episodes a week. Mondays drop usually some sort of episode that's a, kind of more general business, like kind of whatever I'm interested in. Or, I've had Mike McCowitz on. I've had Steve Sims. I've got Cameron Harrell by the time this thing launches. A number of famous authors and just guys who are growing a business, scaling a business, solving problems. And then on Fridays, I do a franchise-specific episode, which could be an interview with a franchisor, successful franchisee, or just me speaking on a topic for 10 or 15 minutes solo. And so those are the 2 best ways, I'd say, is on Twitter or find my podcast.
And that was Business with Beers?
Business with Beers, yep.
Great. Well, Brian, this has been an education. Thank you very much for coming on. Really great to understand this playbook. It sounds like it's could be a really great opportunity in a lot of markets around the country, and one that isn't going to be here in 5 years. So people should really take note. Thank you, sir, and congratulations on quite a story yourself with the Midas roll-up.
Great. Thanks for having me, Will.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week. So tons of new interviews and stories to come, stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.